both the general cause and themselves. The PLO's campaigns in the 1970s made the organization the dominant representative of the Palestinians. They also helped solidify the Palestinians' own sense of their distinct identity, which until then had been relatively weak. Just as terrorists make a difference to the world, so changes in the world make a difference to terrorists. It was not just their own weakness that led the British to quit India, or later Cyprus, whose Oka gunmen, though damned as terrorists, were more like guerrilla fighters, or later still Kenya, where they faced a genuinely terrorist liberation movement. Weakness played its part, but so did a worldview that said colonial empires had had their day. Much the same was true in South Africa. F.W. de Klerk, probably the last white president there, may not have been a more virtuous man than the architects of apartheid who preceded him. But he was and is a realist, who lived in different days and under different pressures. In that case, a just cause plainly helped the terrorists. For Muslim countries the Palestinian cause was no less just. Western countries, guiltily aware of the horrors of Jewish history, disagreed, and it took 20 years of Israeli occupation and the Intifada, the Palestinian uprising of 1987–90, to persuade them that the PLO too had a case. It is still not one that much impresses Americans, and though other Westerners may have sympathy with Palestinian dreams of statehood, any movement that still seeks a quite different thing, that destruction of Israel, on top will, very rightly, find that its bombers face a Western world united behind the Jewish state. Like the rest of us, mostly. In all this, what is different about dealing with terrorism? The answer, perhaps unsurprisingly, is not very much. Any government has its own interests, its own pressures, its concessions it can make and those it cannot. It fights its conventional wars with tanks and aircraft, its small-scale wars, partly terrorist, mostly not, with intelligence men and small arms. It cannot, usually, zap the terrorists' territory as it could that of a hostile state. But its psychology will be much the same in the two cases, and so will that of its enemies. The terrorist or suicide bomber or gunman or fighter or liberation hero is not different from other men. Rarely have women played any notable part, any more than they have in old-fashioned war. With one notable exception, the nutters, whether with a cause or no evident cause at all. The American way-out redneck who thinks he has to plant a bomb, when he could vote for Pat Buchanan, is beyond any but a psychiatrist's reach. So too elitist solipsists like the Baader-Meinhof mob, convinced that murder was justified because they knew all the answers and it was society that was out of step. Among the almost causeless, Italy's far right may have sought instability, but for what? That was never clear. And no known concession could have led Japan's Shinrikyo cult to put aside its chemistry set. Is it coincidence that three of these four groups seem to specialize in the true terrorism, the random murder of civilians for terror's sake? Perhaps it is not. End. This special essay is from an issue of The Economist that also writes on In the Mind of the Terrorist, a new plan for Ulster and Israel, Palestine and Hamas.